This is Carson Dudick. We are in the history department of Dallas Hall. I am interviewing René Martinez on July 7th, 2018. Okay, so where and when were you born?
I was born in Dallas, 1946, December. I'm first generation Mexican American.
And so what was your neighborhood like?
I'm sorry?
What was your neighborhood like?
It was called Little Mexico. It was probably not more than 15 minutes away from campus here. It was off Cole Avenue, and we called it El Barrio, which means the neighborhood, but it was on the fringes of Little Mexico, which the public housing is still there, and it's called Little Mexico. And it was a great neighborhood, a lot of single-family homes, not very many apartments, a sense of neighborhood, a lot of sense of culture.
So can you tell me about your family?
My mom and dad came from central Mexico, from San Luis Potosí, and they came right during the revolution, 1918. And they slowly moved up through central Texas and moved to Dallas, probably in the early or late 1920s. They were from the same part of Mexico, but they didn't know each other. They knew their families, and eventually they met and they married. My dad lived in Waco for a while, and then they married here in Dallas. Had my oldest brother, Servando, who is a psychiatrist, a doctor, and he went to Austin College and Southwestern Medical School. So there were just two of us. My dad was a waiter all of his life. My mother was a homemaker. My dad saved a lot of money, and he bought a house, a real nice house, right on the corner of Cole, Ruth, and Cedar Springs. It's no longer there, but it was a two-story house, and my mother rented all the apartments in the top of the house to people that were coming from Mexico, and we lived in the first floor.
And so what was a normal day like at home for you?
Depending on the age, growing up, we went to a neighborhood school, William B. Travis Elementary, which is on McKinney Avenue. It's still there. Went to two William B. Travises. The old William B. Travis burned down in 1953. And then my mother was the head of the PTA, and so they had transferred all of us to a school by the name of Cumberland Hill, which is right over there by Clyde Warren Park. Still there, built in 1888. Travis had been built in 1882. And so growing up, it was going to a school that was pretty inferior, very old, very decrepit. And my mother and some of the moms in the PTA really worked real hard for years to get our new school rebuilt. And she was very successful in getting it rebuilt. And so going to the new Travis offered a lot of other dimensions. We had a gym. I was into sports because I grew up playing baseball, played a lot of baseball, some soccer at Pikes Park, which is over there on Harry Hines. But in our school, we didn't have a gym. So when the new school was built, we had a gym. So we had a basketball team, played a lot of basketball, just enjoyed sports and had some good teachers there at Travis. Later went to Spence Middle School, still there, and continued. I did fairly well in my academics. Not as good as my brother. My brother was literally a genius, but he mentored me a lot, and he kept me on track. So our routine was go to school, study, play sports, and then my dad introduced us to the whole world of work, and he took me to work when I was about 13, 14 years old. He worked in the restaurant business. So I started working at a very early age, which was, I think, important because it taught me the work ethic, how to save money, and my brother mentored me in sports, and my mother provided us the guidance in terms of making sure that we stayed out of trouble.
And so was your middle and elementary school, were they integrated, or was it just everybody was there a lot of other races, or was it just mostly Latino?
At Travis, kinder through 7th grade, we had, and I'm still her Facebook friend, Ann Barr was the only Anglo in my school. And we're still friends. And I think she lives up in Minnesota. And that was the only Anglo in our school. Then when we transferred to middle school, it was probably about 30% Latino, Mexican, and 70% Anglo. And then when I went to North Dallas High School, it was kind of the same, 40% Latino, the rest Anglo. Kids who went with us at Spence came over, so they were the same friends. I never attended a school with African Americans, even though African Americans lived on the other side of McKinney Avenue from us. It was kind of a stone's throw. We had segregated schools in Dallas probably up until 67, 68, even though there was an integration order. The schools were not integrated. So the first African American that I went to school was here at SMU. It was Jerry LeVias. And we kind of hit it off since he was the only black, and I think there was only a handful of Hispanics here at SMU. So I basically attended schools where, predominantly Anglo or half and half, and then no African Americans. But grew up really living in two worlds, having a lot of Anglo friends, but also having a lot of Mexican American friends from our neighborhood.
And so, what was high school life like for you?
It was a routine. It was, I worked evenings. I played sports. I played basketball, played baseball, and I studied a lot. I was not an A student. I was probably a B student because my brother, just stayed on top of me. But it was work, athletics, and planning to go to college, because the decision to go to college was never one that we had to decide upon. It was always, you're going to go, because my brother had gone. And I had a couple of teachers at North Dallas that took an interest in me. One was my homeroom teacher that always was telling me, look, if you want to go to college, I can help you. You've got good grades. And I kind of, ignored her because she was an older white lady. And later found out after I applied to SMU and got admitted, her name was Betty Clements. And her brother was Bill Clements, who was the Board of Governors president. And so she probably had quite a bit to do with me getting accepted into SMU, even though I kind of didn't pay attention to her, but she helped. So, as you know, the Clements, I think there's a plaque of Miss Clements upstairs in this building.
So what prompted you to choose SMU?
I liked it because of its location. My dad had taken me to some football games at the Cotton Bowl. I liked the colors and the pomp of football games, and it was close to home. I wanted to stay home. My brother had gone to Austin College in Sherman, and I had a good job as a waiter, as a caterer, and so I'd save money. And my mom cooked, did all the laundry, and had a room. So why should I go out of town? And SMU is a good school, so when I got admitted, I jumped to it, and we paid our way through school.
Did SMU have a reputation amongst the Latinx community?
No, not really. There was no reputation other than it was a good school. I knew a couple of folks that had been to law school, Frank Hernandez and Adelpha Callejo. They were older than me, so I knew that a very small handful had gone to SMU. But I just knew that it was a good school academically, and it had a good athletic department.
Did you have any expectations coming here?
Just to get a good education and meet people. And I was kind of open-minded. I had a lot of mentors here at SMU among the faculty. I mean, a lot more than in high school. And to this date, as they pass away, I have I have less, but within the past 10 years, I've had maybe 5, 6 of my former professors pass away. And we stayed in touch, throughout my life. So I think if there was any benefit from SMU was the mentorship of professors that I had who were really the pillars of this university. Starting with Dr. Conchita Wynn, who was the head of the Spanish department. And she got me to major in Latin American affairs. Glenn Linden and Jack Long, who were pillars of the history department. I ended up winning my senior year the Herbert Gambrell Award for Outstanding History Student at SMU. I love history. And then I had others. I had Dr. Dick Rubottom, who was a former Undersecretary of State. He taught Latin American government. He and Conchita recommended me to an exchange program to Peru while I was here. Then I had other women, Dr. Betty Maynard, who was the head of sociology department, Dr. Barbara Reagan, who was the head of economics department. A lot of women that just took me under their wing. And they were all very politically active in the community too. So they mentored me academically, and then later in life, they mentored me politically.
So you mentioned that you lived at home. You didn't live on campus?
Well, some weekends I'd stay on campus. Spent some nights in Bose Hall and a couple of dorms. I made a lot of friends. A lot of my friends were from outside of Dallas, ironically. I mean, like Jerry. A couple of Mexican-American football players. Hayden Fry was a head coach, and he really had integrated the team. So he had our 2 quarterbacks were Mexican-American from Corpus Christi. He had a running back, Zeke Sanchez from Odessa. And so I made friends with them because we were the only guys around on campus. And they would always hang around with me because they knew that on some weekends I would go to Mexican dances and they would tag along. Before I knew it, I had friends from Florida, from Georgia, from Illinois, and they would tag along because they would come and stay home at my house. My mother would cook for them. We'd have a lot of empty rooms, and so they'd go, "We want to go with you to those Mexican dances and see part of your culture and be with you." And then other weekends we'd be here on campus. There'd be parties here. There was a very active Latin American organization here on campus, mostly Central Americans, Panamanians, Peruvians, Argentines, and so I was a part of that, Colombians. And so that was kind of our a club that kind of held us together in terms of language and culture.
So were you involved in any other clubs or sports?
No, I played club soccer. SMU didn't have a soccer team, so we had a club soccer team from guys here on campus. So I played on that team a lot. And then the history department, did a lot of projects with them. I did a lot of research for a couple of history professors. I spent a lot of time at the DeGolyer Library. I translated a lot of stuff from colonial times in Spanish to English for a couple of professors who were writing books. So I did a lot of that. And that was fun. That was fun because it correlated with my major. I had a major in Latin American affairs, and then I ended up majoring in history and in Spanish. So it all kind of was intertwined into, the point of interest that I had.
So your social life surrounded around your friend group. And so was your friend group more integrated than the majority of the school, would you say?
Not really integrated. They were just, I was the only Mexican American among them. And I made a lot of other friends. I played a lot of intramural ball. I played soccer, basketball, and baseball. And that's where I met a lot of the local guys, but mostly guys from out of the state. A real good friend of mine, Rocky Saxby, who's later became a senator in Ohio, and whose father had been Attorney General under Nixon, was a guy that I played against. That's where I really got to know Jerry LeVias, because Jerry could play basketball with me, and we played on the same team, and we bonded, we became friends. And so a lot of it was in sports. I was a pretty good soccer player, so better than the average guy, so everybody liked me because I knew how to play soccer. Play a lot of football. So sports, intramurals really was kind of the point of socialization. It wasn't necessarily parties. I wasn't into fraternities. The Latin American group, I socialized with Latin American students, some Anglos who joined that because they were interested in Latin American culture. So it was really sports, and the Latin American groups.
So can you walk me through a typical day as a student here?
I would study a lot. I had to study because my high school didn't prepare me. I'd gone to summer school the year before I was a freshman. And my brother made me go to summer school to take a government class. And I made a D in it. And the reason he made me take it was because he wanted me to learn how to take notes and how to get acclimated to the college environment. And he just forced me. That was the only summer that I didn't work. So my normal day was I would come to school, I'd study, I'd play sports, a lot of intramural sports in the afternoon, go home and work, go to the restaurants. I worked at a restaurant called Casa Dominguez. I would work a lot of evenings, weekends, some weekends I'd work, and when I was not working or after work, go to Mexican parties and clubs and dances, taking a lot of my friends from campus with me who were open-minded. They enjoyed being at my house and eating Mexican food cooked by my mother. And so that was our social life. And but a lot of sports and studying. I had to study a lot because I really wasn't academically that smart. I had a real low GPA for the first year, like 1.6, 1.7, barely made it. And then once I got into my major courses, my GPA really got a lot better. And I ended up with, I think, about a 3-point because I took a lot. I went to summer school every summer. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. That's why I ended up with 3 majors. So I really enjoyed the history courses and Latin American culture courses, Spanish courses. Really enjoyed it. And so, but I studied, went to school, played sports, and worked. Saved money, because tuition was what it is, not at what it is now, but it was very expensive.
So can you tell me a couple of your most memorable experiences here?
Probably the day that Dr. Martin Luther King came to campus. Jerry LeVias and I, went to see him, and I remember him vividly said, I wanted to sit in the front so I could see him well. And Jerry said, no, let's sit in the back. I said, why are we going to sit in the back? We don't have to sit in the back. He said, if something happens, we're the first ones out of the door. So, and he said, you can't outrun me. I can run pretty fast. So, there was protesters outside. I think the John Birch Society and a couple of KKers were outside protesting. And that was real memorable because after the presentation, Jerry was asked to go speak to Dr. King. And I didn't go with him. I should have, but I didn't. And he later told me that he encouraged him to keep a very nonviolent personality and attitude, because Jerry was going through hell while he was here at SMU, not only on the athletic field, but here on campus. His fellow football players weren't treating him well. He couldn't shower in the same showers with him. He went through a lot of stuff that he never shared with people. He'd shared with me because we'd socialize, you know. I introduced him to my cousin, who was an airline stewardess, and we went out partying together. And he loved to dance. I loved to dance. So we had good times. So we'd share those intimate things that happened to us on campus that he normally wouldn't share with others. So that was very memorable. The other memorable thing was being selected to go to Peru. There was 8 of us that got selected. Of course, I was the only Mexican American. It was an all-paid trip. We studied 2 months in Trujillo, Peru, and so that was kind of, you know, I was kind of proud of that. And then being selected to be the Gambrell Award winner, I think they gave me $100, but in those days, $100 was a lot of money, and that was kind of nice.
So, did you ever feel that you were treated differently for being Latinx?
I think I was treated by faculty members with more care and more, how should I say it, more of a mentorship role than anything else. Did I have incidents with guys? Oh yeah, absolutely, you know, all the time. You know, just in the dorms. I'd come and spend the night in dorms with my friends, and, you know, just BS things that they would say, but not anything outright. Some females, you know, just kind of looking down on you. So yeah, it was isolated incidents, but more in terms of a real caring attitude on the part of the faculty. I had some really good teachers.
So I know you graduated in 1969, but that year, the following year, I guess, the Black Society protested at the president's office for more students of color on campus. Did you hear about that, or?
I attended some of their meetings because I had friends that were African American later. Because, you know, Jerry was the first black. He came in. There was a young lady who was also African, Yvonne, I think her name was, came in, and then 3 or 4 more. Then Rufus Colmier and a couple of others. But so I knew some of the undergraduates, and that later did that. And I attended some of their meetings. I had gotten involved when I was a senior at SMU with, again, because of the faculty members. There was a program under sociology department that was doing some research on Mexican Americans at LTV, which is a airplane manufacturing company. And so we did, we were paid to do a survey of the workers that were coming from the valley here. And that's where I met other Mexican Americans who were, by that time, were in the grad school, not undergrad. And they were former teachers or teachers and principals that were coming from the valley, getting their masters here. And I met with them because I was a senior, and I met them, and we started talking a lot about, that was prior to 70, but it was around 69, 70, because I graduated in May, and I continued working in the sociology department with Dr. Maynard. And that's where we kind of got the genesis here on campus to start asking questions about the school district, the hiring of teachers, bilingual education. And it was among those friends that were in grad school, and I was just graduating, and those teachers that were saying, hey, what do you think? I remember the event. I think it was at Moody, I think. I'm not sure. But just my parents being very proud of us.
So as you reflect back on your time here, how do you feel about it overall?
Kind of mixed emotions. The faculty, of course, I've got a lot of love and respect for Dr. Maynard, Dr. Reagan, Dr. Rubottom, Linden, all, Ed Silvest, a lot of people in the theology school too. Theology school was very active in the community. So if it hadn't been for them, I don't think I would have been as involved in the community They kind of would challenge me. I remember Conchita Wynn, she was Puerto Rican, and she kind of embarrassed me the first day in class in Spanish, and she said, "Do you speak Spanish, Mr. Martinez?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I do." She said, how well do you speak it?" I said, "Fairly good." And it was in front of like 45 young ladies, and I was the only guy in the class, and of course I was the only Hispanic. And she said, "Well, when I finish with you, you're going to use your language, Spanish language, to help your community." And I didn't know what she was talking about. I was like, "Okay," and everybody kind of laughed, and I didn't realize it, and it was a prophecy. I spoke it well, but when I finished, when I graduated, I was biliterate. I could read it, I could write it, I could speak it. I'd gone to Peru. I've been to Mexico on a couple of trips too with the university. So that was the part that really kind of shaped and molded me into, the person that I am as far as the commitment that I have in the community. On the other side, institutionally, I think SMU could do a lot more. I taught a couple of years, and recently the school has not shown, especially the education department, has not shown the commitment to what some of us really envisioned SMU should be all about. The enrollment's going to be the enrollment. Just like African American enrollment will never grow, because for African Americans, I still believe the socialization process is a challenge. But with Latinos, it ought to be wide open. And I just don't think the university has that commitment to get beyond that point and to help enroll and register more Latino students. And when I say Latino students, I'm talking about Mexican Americans. I'm not talking about students from Latin America or Mexico. I'm talking about kids from Dallas, from San Antonio, from Texas. And then programmatically, in terms of making some real commitments to getting really involved in the issues and the priorities of education for Latinos.
So after your time at SMU, did you continue studying and going to school, or did you transition into your professional life right away?
No, I took some graduate courses for my MPA, and I got involved in West Dallas when I think I was a senior at SMU. They had a YMCA program here, and I was a volunteer, and so I got thrust into being a tutor in West Dallas, mentoring kids, and because of that. And so right after that, and I was going to grad school, and then a couple of years later I got married, and I dropped out of grad school, and I got a job because of some of the things that were going on in the community. I was at the right place, the right time, said the right things, and I got thrust into the civil rights period in Dallas.
So, speaking of the civil rights period, can you expand more on that? I saw that you started a couple of, you started the League of United Latin American Citizens, not started it, but you oversaw a chapter of it, and can you tell me more about that?
Well, I'd had a history in Dallas around that time, 70. You got to understand that the civil rights period passed Dallas, went right by it. We skipped it, we missed it. So I helped form a group called the Mexican American Youth Organization, MAYO, which was organizing all over South Texas and San Antonio, Crystal City, and dealing with education. So I organized a chapter here in Dallas, which was the precursor to my involvement with LULAC, which was in mid-70s, late 70s. And Raza Unida also. Raza Unida was a political party. I was very involved in that. And we had a person who ran for governor, and I was very involved in that. So all those were precursors of LULAC. And in the late 70s, myself and a good friend of mine, Hector Flores, who was from San Antonio, we formed our own LULAC council. You can form different councils. And because we didn't feel LULAC was doing much to deal with school desegregation, there was a lot of shootings of Latinos and African Americans. The Santos Rodriguez shooting had taken place in '73, and I was involved in that as far as the protest marches. And but there wasn't an organization that was really advocating. So we formed our own LULAC council, and that became the focal group for a lot more involvement in the community, especially in the area of education.
And so, did you feel that SMU helped you with your passion for LULAC and the entire civil rights organization, or was it just completely separate from SMU?
No, I think, again, keep in mind, I stayed in touch with all my professors. You know, Glenn Linden was calling me when I was involved in school desegregation as an appointee of the federal judge to the Triethnic Committee, and later with the Dallas Alliance. Glenn would call me every week. You know, he'd say, Renee, keep me posted, send me notes. And I would send him notes. I would send him some of the notes of what we were doing. And he was always talking to me. Conchita Wynn and her husband, Ed Wynn, were very, very staunch Democrats. And they were supporting Barefoot Sanders when he ran for office, and other people that were running for office. And so they would stay in touch with me. Barbara Reagan was very active. So, you know, this is the 70s, 80s. And we were friends. We were by that time we were colleagues, and so our relationships didn't end just when I graduated. In fact, it was just another phase in my life, and those folks really, you know, I bounced things off of them. When I was on a lot of committees dealing with school desegregation, there was a professor here by the name of Bill Pulte. He was the foremost bilingual professor probably in the state of Texas. And so he developed a program that trained bilingual teachers who ended up being, you know, campus leaders and principals. And so we were always talking to Bill about, what do you think about these issues? What do you think about bilingual education? How do we expand it? And so that link to SMU was there. And it's one that, again, like I said, if I had any feelings about SMU now, is that it doesn't exist anymore. There's no one at SMU that I can call and say, what do you think about this issue? I just got put on the Goals for Dallas by the mayor, and I'm going to help broaden the involvement and focus on the issues for the next 15 years. I normally would have called someone at SMU. I'm not calling anybody. There's no one I can call. You know, so that source of higher education is, for me, it's not there anymore. Yeah.
So what prompted you to stay in Dallas instead of going anywhere else?
Family. I got married and had kids, and I remarried, and my wife Beatrice got very involved. We had 2 more boys, so we have 4 boys, and just family. My parents were here. My mom and dad didn't pass away until the mid-90s. And so just the fact that all our relatives are from here, you know, the Martinezes and the Villasanas, which is the other family, they're all from here. So I had no reason to leave. I had good jobs. That's the one thing that SMU did help me. Saying that I graduated at SMU, it sure didn't hurt my opportunities in terms of getting employment.
So in recent years, what has life looked like for you?
I retired from DISD in 2012, and I'm now busier work-wise than I ever was. I'm an educational consultant with a dual language university, Ana Mendez. I work with a young man by the name of Eric Reeves, who has various companies. He's married to Catherine Perot. He's very involved with the Perot Museum, and he and I are partners. So I hired him to do some things with me, and he's hired me to help him on educational projects. So I'm very busy. I teach at Eastfield College. I taught at A&M Commerce, where I got my master's degree for several years. I taught at SMU for a couple of years in the graduate program, but now I teach literally one course every semester, training mostly young women, to become bilingual teaching assistants and ultimately become teachers. So I've been doing that for 5 years. So teaching has been my passion, and spent a lot of time with my grandkids and the family.
So looking back on everything, do you have any regrets at all?
No, none whatsoever. If I had to do it over again, there would be things that I would do differently. I would have probably tried out for basketball. I think I could have made the team, but it was that sense of inferiority that I didn't do that. I should have pushed harder and maybe played more baseball, and which I didn't. I should have. And again, just taking that step. Everybody would say, René, do it. So those are my only regrets in sports, because I'm still into sports. I love sports. I have a son that's a coach, and I have a granddaughter who's a star basketball player, and so I love sports. And so that's the one thing that's missing from my involvement at SMU.
So you keep in touch with your mentors from SMU? Did you keep in touch with your friends?
Yeah, Jerry. Jerry and I talk all the time. We text each other and email each other, and we stay in touch kind of on a weekly basis. How are things going? He's still very involved with the university, and I want to get more involved with the university also. And so but I failed to mention I was the founder of the Mexican American Alumni Association, and so they're really doing well, and served on the alumni board for several years. I helped get the Dedman Scholarship set up, thanks to Mr. Dedman, and it's a scholarship for kids from North Dallas High School. We're trying to get around this whole issue of race and ethnicity, and in Mr. Dedman's wisdom, and my suggestion was, let's do it at North Dallas. Let's pick 4 students from North Dallas, and he wanted to give them scholarships. He went to North Dallas, and so he set up the Dedman Scholarship about 20 years ago. So since 20 years ago, we've had 4 graduates from North Dallas come to SMU, full scholarship. So I had a little bit to do with that. So that was my involvement with the alumni group, and then setting up the Hispanic Alumni Group.
So is there any advice that you would give upcoming Mexican-American students at SMU?
I do it all the time. I mentor maybe 15 or 20 kids. When I say kids, high school and college students and adults that are educators. But the young ones that want to come to SMU is really do well academically, prep for the ACT, SAT, figure out how much you're going to, those exams, your GPA, your class rank is going to bring you money, and figure out what that financial gap is going to be. And if your financial gap is huge, and I've told several students that were like, I want to go to SMU, I want to go to SMU, and their financial gap was huge, and I'd ask them, did you win the lottery? If you won the lottery, go to SMU, but if you didn't win the lottery, then pick another school, because your financial gap is huge. So that's the advice that I give kids. Do well academically, you'll get in. If you still want to stay here, make sure that you're going to, have the money and savings and or work to not graduate with a huge debt, because it can be a huge debt.
And so is there anything that you feel I may have missed that you want to further discuss?
No, you have some good questions.
Okay, so I think that's about it.
Great.